Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here, the host of this show. And every week I get to talk to interesting CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs from a range of companies. Go check out the archives because we've got some great interviews with CEOs and founders from, Netflix to Activation Blizzard, LendingTree, EO, YPO, Axe Software, many more. I'm also the co-founder of Rise25, where we help connect B2B business owners to their ideal prospects. And before I introduce today's guest, I'm going to give a big shout out to Shirin Arizi of Next Step, who is a past guest on my show and a friend. And she referred me back to today's guest, who I had met previously and communicated with previously. And this is also part of our UC Santa Barbara Top Entrepreneur Series, profiling some of the top entrepreneurs, founders, and CEOs from the UCSB community, which I'm a alum from, great university. And so our guest is Russell Benaroya. He's the co-founder and partner at Stride. He's a seasoned entrepreneur. Stride is an outsourced bookkeeping, accounting, and strategic finance services company supporting professional service firms nationwide. He's also a podcaster. He also has a new book that's out called One Life to Lead: Business Success Through Better Life Design. We're going to get into that in a second. And before we get to that, this episode, of course, is brought to you by Rise25 Media, where we help B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. If you're listening to this and you've ever thought, should I start a podcast? Well, Russell, I have told people for 11 years that everyone should start a podcast because it's such great benefits flow to your life. So tell me, how have you liked doing a podcast?
It's been so much fun. I am by nature incredibly curious. I'll get people that say to me, Russell, am I ever going to get to ask you a question? I love asking questions. And so the fact that I can apply that to the podcast, it has worked out perfectly. And it's been such a gift for me because I learn a ton. And it's so great for the people that I interview because it gives them a place to share about themselves in a authentic, intimate way.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it any better myself. Well said. So if you have any questions about that, go to rise25media.com and we would be happy to help you out. So Russell, such a pleasure to have you here. We first connected through the EO community. You came and did a training through the EO Accelerator program that I was part of. But I want to go even further back in your trajectory. You've been an entrepreneur for a long time. Starting as a kid, were you the kind of kid who was out there doing lemonade stands on your parents' front lawn every weekend? Or did you come to this a little bit later in life after you'd gotten your MBA at UCLA, after you'd gone to UC Santa Barbara? When did it hit you?
Yeah. I come from a very entrepreneurial family. My dad was a beer distributor. It was a business that was started by my grandfather. His brother is a big developer here in Seattle. And so I grew up around entrepreneurship, but interestingly enough, I did not get the entrepreneurial bug until a little bit later on. I was more the guy that liked counting the coins and like doing the financial modeling. I was an econ major with a minor in accounting, for gosh sake, at UC Santa Barbara. And so I really liked the finance side of the business. And so when I got out of school and I went and worked in investment banking in New York and then went to business school and subsequently worked in private equity, I thought, oh my gosh, I have arrived. That's all you need to know is finance, until I thought to myself, wait a second, I'm 28 years old. I'm giving people advice on their business. I'm deciding whether or not we should invest in their business. And I've never run a business myself. And so I had this energy to get out from behind that desk and be an operator. And I had a unique opportunity in our first startup to just jump and go for it, and caught the bug. And here we are 16 years later.
So naturally, you've worked in private equity, you've worked on Wall Street. You thought, I'm going to start a chain of sleep centers. That makes perfect sense. So
it's very common. Yes, very logical.
Of course, the natural trajectory. So how did that come about? How did you and your business partner, Eric Page, how did you decide on that particular business opportunity?
Yeah. Eric and I were classmates together in business school, and we have a mutual friend who said when he heard that the two of us were partnering together, he's like, "Oh my gosh, you guys are going to last like 6 months together. Like we are so different." He's the guy that makes sure all the trains leave on time. I'm the guy that makes sure there are actually passengers on the train. But figuring out how to work together is a job, is an effort for any partnership. This particular opportunity arose because I was working in a private equity firm. We invested in a healthcare company of which a portion of their business was in this area of sleep medicine. They were distributing CPAP devices for people that have sleep apnea. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is such an interesting area of healthcare for which there is a great need, but really underrepresented in terms of delivering quality care for people with sleep problems. And I think we can all attest more today than maybe ever before, like sleep is such an integral part of health, especially for people that are managing chronic health conditions like diabetes, heart disease, et cetera. And so I thought, hey, I think we can do this. Like, let's get into sleep because sleep medicine is very interesting. And again, the world works in funny ways. I met a doctor who was in sleep medicine. And so we partnered with him to start this company. And I thought, wow, how hard could this really be? I mean, you just kind of put in some money and then you get a 5x return in 5 years. Like that's how it works. And of course it doesn't work like that. Like it's so freaking hard. And we learned a lot. So we raised about $7 million. We put our mouth over the fire hydrant of getting contracted with insurance companies and hiring doctors and figuring out how to get patients. And it was a deep dive, not only into healthcare, but into the wild world of entrepreneurship, which has no guarantees.
Yeah, for sure. And did you start with multiple locations, one location?
Maybe this was a telltale sign, but there was a company in Arizona that was shutting its doors and sleep medicine was going out of business. And so
it's kind of like the restaurant on the corner that goes out of business. And then you see a new restaurant move in, you're always like, what were they thinking?
It was a little bit like that. And I thought we had a better mousetrap, et cetera. And so we ended up taking over their locations and then we added some locations. So we ended up having 5 locations in and around the Phoenix area.
How did your experience in private equity shape or guide your decision-making when you became an entrepreneur?
Well, I think it helped me tell a story through data, tell a story through financials that could be effective in capitalizing the business. So one of the responsibilities, I was the CEO of that business, is I have a couple of responsibilities. One is make sure you don't run out of money and keep everybody focused on a clear strategy, right? So like I had 2 primary roles. And obviously you do whatever you need to do. I also took out the garbage. So whatever it takes. Knowing the language of finance was super helpful. Being able to build the financial model, talk about the unit economics of a location, gave me a level of sophistication for what I needed to do to capitalize the business. What I didn't fully appreciate was that the classes in business school that I kind of yawned at a little bit, which was HR and marketing, really are the most important pieces of types of content that really matter in building enterprise. And so I stumbled a lot and had to learn.
So it was a 5-year trajectory, and looks like about 2 years into it, you're feeling kind of lonely, not connected with a lot of other entrepreneurs, and you have lunch with a friend who says, I got a community for you. Tell us about that.
So I'm having lunch with a guy by the name of Adam Brotman, and Adam Brotman, he's a pretty well-known guy. He went on to become the the chief digital officer at Starbucks. And then I believe he went on to become the president of J. Crew. But he was running a startup at the time called Play Networks. And that was a company and he was an EO member. And I was lamenting to him during lunch that I had a really difficult shareholder that was making my life really, really difficult. And I was super stressed out. And he shared with me an experience that he had at Play with some really difficult shareholders and how he was dealing with it. And for the first time, I thought, oh, so it's not me. It's not just me. How about that? It's not just me. I'm not on an island, because I was feeling really isolated. And he said, no. It's not you. And it doesn't matter what industry you're in. It is the journey of entrepreneurship. Let me show you the path to find more people like this. That's how I got connected.
And then was the plan with REM Medical to have it be acquired by private equity? Did you have an end plan? I imagine you did.
Yeah, our goal was to build the company to the point that, yes, it could be consumed by another investment firm or by a strategic acquirer. And there was a fair amount of activity in the industry at the time. Some larger players than us were in the industry. And we thought we could build enough of a critical mass in the geographic territory we were in to affect that. And we did, in fact, do that. So in 2009, we sold the business to a company called Sleep Health Centers out of Boston. They ran all of the Harvard-affiliated sleep medicine facilities, among others, on the East Coast. And we thought this is a great vehicle for us to be a consumed or part of a much bigger play. And at the time, that was the right decision. Again, hindsight's a beautiful thing. It was the right decision based on what we knew at the time as we were coming into the recession. I don't know if you remember 2009, not an awesome time. By the way.
Yeah.
And
was your back against the wall when you sold it then, or
like the business was profitable, but like modestly profitable. And we really just didn't have an appetite to raise more capital for the business. And with our shareholder group, it wasn't the right dynamic to raise more money. And we were losing a little bit of enthusiasm for the potential. And we thought, okay, let's become part of something that's more substantial. I think we could get further faster on a risk reward basis. The epilogue on that is the company that acquired us about 3 years after they acquired us ended up shutting their doors.
Oh, wow.
For some very company specific reasons. And that was hard. I wasn't there any longer. I'd been gone for about 2 years.
So you stuck around for a little bit then? What was that experience like?
Stuck around for about 6 months.
How did that go? You hear horror stories. Yeah, you hear stories. Yeah.
Yeah, it was horrible. But not horrible in the sense of like I'm blaming anybody for it being horrible. I think it was horrible because we so often go into these arrangements without a clear shared agreement with the acquiring company about roles and responsibilities. And we just didn't have a clear shared agreement. And so there was ambiguity, and that creates consternation and resentment. Pretty textbook.
Yeah, pretty much. Your next business, Every Move, you started out of Techstars, which is, I guess, an accelerator, you'd call it. What was that experience like, starting a business out of an accelerator versus the way you'd started the other company?
So we had sold REM Medical, and I'm in the car one evening with one of my fellow forum mates. His name's Andy Liu. Andy Liu runs a venture firm today called Unlock Ventures, but a very successful entrepreneur. And I was sharing with him, he was a very successful technology entrepreneur, and I was sharing with him how slow healthcare has been in developing consumer strength technologies to really help people engage in taking better care of themselves. Now, remember, this was back in 2010. So it sounds a little trite today, but back then it was like, yes, there's not a lot out there. And he said, you're so right. It would be great if we could develop a technology that was really engaging, like encouraged and incented and motivated people to want to be more healthy, more active. And so we ended up having a meeting with the local Blue Cross firm here in Washington State, Premera Blue Cross. And it was right at the time where they were thinking a lot about their engagement strategy, their consumer engagement strategy to activate people to take more responsibility for their health. And so they provided us with the initial seed funding. They got excited about some ideas that we had. They provided us with some initial seed funding, and then we applied and were accepted into Techstars, which is really an accelerator to get to a place of not only developing the business model and the product, but also getting on stage in front of a whole bunch of investors to help you raise money to take your product to the next level. And we were effective doing that in raising money from the Blue Cross Blue Shield Venture Fund to build what essentially was a mileage rewards plan for your health, where people could track their activities through all these different wearable devices that were coming on the scene. You might remember Fitbit and
yeah, I mean, this is 2010, right?
Yeah.
So I don't remember when Fitbit started, and that's even early days of iPhone.
You're right. No, exactly. So like Strava was just coming out, Garmin, Runkeeper, Fitbit.
It's pre-Apple Watch, pre-Peloton,
right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so we created this consumer experience where people could connect their apps or devices. We normalized the data that they were capturing into this point system, and people could socialize around the points. They could compare each other. And then we created a rewards vehicle so that health insurance companies and employers could systematically reward people for hitting certain milestones or targets around their physical activity. And so that was our pursuit of trying to change the conversation around healthcare, which is, hey, if you're actually doing things in your life that measurably reduce your risk, let's create a positive feedback loop to recognize you for it.
Yeah. What always strikes me about different entrepreneurs who've started different companies is how you can see in a way that the subsequent business is different from the previous one, sometimes deliberately so. So for example, friend and neighbor of mine, Adam, co-founder of one of these meal delivery companies. And you think about all the challenges they had: perishable food, refrigerated, distribution, all those challenges. His subsequent business, totally digital, totally online. It's like moving money internationally. It's like all the barriers that were headaches before, he got rid of. So for you, every move, I'm struck by the fact that, there's no physical location, it sounds like, and it's a very different type of business. Did you think that through, or do you think that, looking back on it now, every move was different because of your experience with REM Medical?
It's such a great question, John. When Eric, my partner from REM Medical, and I were sitting at his house after we had sold the business, and we were ruminating on purpose. Like, why are we doing what we're doing? And we came up with this big, lofty vision. It said, we want to be in businesses that can improve the lives of 10 million people in 10 years. And the reason we set that vision was that it's very hard to build a business in healthcare that can affect that many people. And so you have to think different. You have to think scale. You have to think technology. Now, we went off and did our separate thing. So Eric was not my partner on every move, but at every move, we ran with that purpose. I want to improve the lives of 10 million people in 10 years. And that took me naturally to a place of thinking about how are we going to use technology to do that and get a level of scale that traditional healthcare services like REM Medical in Arizona was never going to achieve.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. And then, so you do that until about 2017. How did you end up exiting that business?
Yeah. So we sold the company in 2017 to a company out of Chicago called Higi, Higi. And Higi's a really interesting business. They operate the nation's largest network of health screening kiosks in major retailers and pharmacies. You've probably been to one. You go into the pharmacy and you see this kiosk and you sit down and it takes your blood pressure and gets other biometrics, right?
Yeah.
So they had about 10,000 of those around the United States, about 3 million people a month sitting down at these stations. And we're looking for ways to better activate and engage and capture more information on the people that sit down at those stations. And so we were acquired by Higgy. The business when we sold it was different than the business when we started it. And the industry had changed quite a bit in 10 years as well. And so instead of just engaging people that were active and healthy and wanted to show off their health, we were really starting to activate people that were unhealthy, had chronic conditions, and really were more expensive to manage for the health insurance companies like diabetics or people with heart conditions. And so we changed the product pretty dramatically by the time we made the decision that we were ready to exit the business.
Yeah. And you obviously didn't sell it in 2009. It wasn't a big downturn like that. Was the timing better? Did that give you better options?
Yeah. So Higgy has continued to navigate in a challenging healthcare environment. And so it's raised some subsequent financing. And so long story short, the story is still being written on Higgy. We will see what happens. And I stayed there for a year and ran corporate development for them.
Okay. And I want to get to your book. I want to ask you about that. But before we do, 2018, you decide to acquire a small bookkeeping and financial services and advisory accounting company, and then kind of take it online. Well, you explain why you decided that type of business and what the challenges have been with that.
I wasn't really wedded to getting into the outsourced bookkeeping and accounting industry. That wasn't like my primary objective. My primary objective was the following. My family and I made a decision to have a year experience abroad, and we moved to Costa Rica in 2018. And that was really a function of my wife and I making a decision in service to what are we trying to do as a family versus what is Russell trying to do as an entrepreneur. Okay. What that demanded was that I get involved in a business that would give me geographic independence. And so that idea kind of took root for me, which is I want to be in a business where I can do it from anywhere in the world. I want to be free. And again, right, the world works in funny ways. So I put that out there metaphorically into the universe. And lo and behold, my first business partner, Eric Page, was working on an idea, or he had a hypothesis around the future of business process outsourcing, how to help entrepreneurs, how to help business owners better focus their resources on the things that they can and should strategically own and get rid of or outsource all those things that are important, but not necessary for them to own. And bookkeeping and accounting have some really interesting attributes that we can go into detail or not here, but we both got really excited about how we could serve entrepreneurs and helping them get in their genius zone by taking over this area of the back office. We started talking to some companies because we decided we wanted to acquire our way into that industry, because building a service business, as you know, John, from scratch is a really long haul. To get from 0 to 1 is a whole lot harder than getting from 1 to 2. And we wanted to bypass that 0 to 1. And so we had the opportunity to acquire a controlling interest in a long-standing outsourced bookkeeping firm that we could use as the foundation to execute this vision.
Now that has its own challenges, just like acquiring, defunct chain of sleep centers that, that didn't work in certain locations. But, acquiring a new business where people are used to doing things a certain way. What was that experience like for you?
It has been an incredible learning experience. And let me just share a piece of data that 100% of the people that were part of the business when we acquired the business are no longer working at the business. And that is not a judgment call on them. It's more about the value of establishing a strategy and executing a strategy that may or may not align with the current people that are there. And what I mean by that is when we acquired the business, we wanted to take that transactional bookkeeping work that's a commodity, and we wanted to move it to our growing team in the Philippines. And we wanted to elevate the people in the United States to be more senior level relationship managers. And I believe in that strategy. It could be wrong, by the way, but I believe in that strategy. The net result was over the course of a couple of years, there were a number of people that weren't interested in being in that role, which is fine.
Yeah.
And navigating through that has been arduous.
Looking back on it now, you rebranded the company also, right?
Yes, to Stride Services.
So you rebranded the company.
Yep.
100% of the people who were there before are no longer there. You got a new team in place.
Yeah.
Would you say that, I guess the question is, what were you buying other than a client list? Was it a client list primarily? And looking back, would you do it the same?
Yeah. What we were acquiring was a foundation. Well, yes, was a book of business. I mean, we were acquiring cash flow.
Yeah.
We're acquiring a profitable business that would give us sufficient resources and allow us to focus on working on the business and not in the business. And so to have people that were in the business, that were executing the day-to-day services, Eric and I could spend more time thinking about the systems and the processes and the infrastructure for this thing that we wanted to create and build versus what would probably otherwise happen. We would be doing a lot of the detailed work early on.
Just like you had with your first business. So I can see again why you made the decision that you did to acquire the business instead. All right, let's talk about the business. One Life to Lead, business success through better life design. It was inspired by that year that you spent in Costa Rica. Tell us about the new book.
Yeah, well, thanks for asking. This is my first interview talking about it, and it will launch in September. So yes, the book title is One Life to Lead, Business Success Through Better Life Design. And the whole idea is before you can lead others, it's worth better understanding how you can lead yourself. And until I was able to step out of the crazy of the day-to-day in running a business and really ask myself, why do I want what I want? Why am I doing what I am doing? What is important to me? Am I working in an area where I'm exceptional? Am I in my genius zone? Am I working with people that give me energy? Am I living in integrity with my principles? Am I essentially taking control of my life? And then once I've taken control of my life, I can be better at applying that to the businesses that I'm involved in. And I hadn't really thought about that because I was so worried about doing the next startup, impressing my family and my friends, being accepted, being worthy. And when I finally realized I don't have to prove my worth, I just have to live it. What does it mean to live it? And if I take control and architect what it is that I want for myself and my family, I'm going to be a lot more effective at managing other people and helping them achieve the lives that they want to create. That was the impetus for the book. And so rather than just writing the Russell Benaroya story, I interviewed 13 entrepreneurs, notable, like they run businesses that you may have heard of, possibly. But they contributed a lot of the content to the book of sharing their own experiences around life design elements that will allow readers, I think, to better identify their own journey.
And staying with that theme of life design, when you had these conversations with these entrepreneurs, did they have any insights or surprises that you weren't expecting that gave you ideas around or shaped your thinking around life design?
Yeah, I think it's an appreciation in the same way that EO, the way that you and I are connected, is an appreciation that under the hood, under the veneer, under the armor is a scared kid that feels a little threatened, that has all the same fears and all the same concerns, all the same desires, right? That we all do, whether it's he or she is in a very successful business, or you're in a struggling business, or you're trying to figure it out. And I think it was just the understanding that, hey, we're all in this together. And yeah, that we're all in this together. And it's not the outcome that matters. It's the journey that matters.
Yeah. Yeah. You also write about getting in and staying in your genius zone, which is a term I use all the time. I love it. I think it's constantly a struggle to stay in your genius zone because, especially as an entrepreneur, you have things that you need to be doing at any given time. And sometimes you don't have the freedom or the liberty to be 100% in your genius zone. So talk a little bit about that concept as you wrote about it in the book.
Yeah. I'm a big believer in Genius Zone. I first heard of Genius Zone from a guy named Lex Sisney. And Lex Sisney wrote a book called Organizational Physics. He was also one of my coaches. Lives in Santa Barbara, by the way. Our
lucky
alma mater.
Guy. Lucky
guy. And it's such a simple idea, John, which is, what is that area in your life where you are exceptionally capable, where it feels effortless for you, where people look at you and say, oh my gosh, how did you do that? And you say, I don't know, I just did it. It's kind of like how I look at you in the podcast. You're super good at it. And you're like, I don't know, I just kind of do it. Like, I'm just good at it. And that's where we want to live 80% of the time. That's where we want to live 80% of the time.
Why 80%?
Because most of us spend about 20% of the time there now. So 80% is a good goal.
Yeah.
It's a good goal. And so organizationally at Stride, we work with our teams as individuals to help them get and stay in their genius zone. And whether that's at Stride or whether that's at another company, we're going to help you, support you in getting there. That's the most important thing.
Great. One Life to Lead is the name of the book. Stride.services is the website for Stride. Where can people go to learn more about you, Russell, and connect with you or ask you a question?
Yeah. So best place to go is stride.services, www.stride.services. You can also find me on LinkedIn at Russell Benaroya. I also have a personal website, which is the benaroyagroup.com. And you can read some of my blog posts there. And you can always email me at russell@benaroya.net.
Excellent. All right, Russell, thanks so much. This has been a pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks, John.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution.
Revolution.
And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.